Did you know that Jesus might have looked completely different from what you've always imagined? A secret letter from ancient Rome claims Jesus had blue eyes and blonde hair. This isn't just any letter, it's an eyewitness account from someone who saw Jesus in person. Prepare to have your mind blown as we reveal the shocking details of Christ's true appearance. This hidden document has been kept under wraps for centuries, but today we're exposing the truth that will make you question everything you thought you knew about Jesus. You won't believe what an ancient Roman official wrote about Jesus. Imagine stumbling upon a letter that could change everything we thought we knew about the appearance of Christ. Well, that's exactly what happened when a mysterious document surfaced, claiming to be from a Roman official named Publius Lentulus to Emperor Tiberius. This isn't just any old letter. It's a detailed eyewitness account of Jesus himself, written by someone who supposedly saw him in person. Can you imagine the excitement of reading a first-hand description of the most influential figure in history? But here's where it gets really interesting. The letter doesn't just confirm what we've always believed about Jesus' appearance. Oh no, it paints a picture that's shockingly different from the Jesus we've seen in countless paintings and statues. So who was this Publius Lentulus? According to the letter, he was the governor of Judea before Pontius Pilate. That means he would have been in the perfect position to observe Jesus during his ministry. But here's the catch. There's no historical record of a governor by that name. Could this be a case of mistaken identity, or is there something more to this mystery? The discovery of this letter sent shockwaves through religious and historical circles. Some hailed it as a groundbreaking find that could revolutionize our understanding of Jesus. Others dismissed it as an elaborate hoax. The controversy surrounding this document is enough to make your head spin. Now, you're probably dying to know what's in this letter. Well, let me tell you, it's not your average boring official correspondence. Lentulus goes into incredible detail about Jesus' appearance, describing everything from his hair to his eyes to his build. And trust me, some of these details will leave you speechless. Are you ready for a taste of what Lentulus wrote? Brace yourself, because this is going to challenge everything you thought you knew about Jesus. According to the letter, Jesus had, wait for it, hair the color of ripe wheat. That's right. The letter describes Jesus as having hair that's the color of chestnut full ripe, plain to his ears, whence downward it is more orient and curling and wavering about his shoulders. Can you picture it? This isn't the dark-haired Jesus we're used to seeing. This is a Jesus with golden brown locks flowing down to his shoulders. But before you start repainting all your pictures of Jesus, we need to ask ourselves, can we trust this letter? Is it really an authentic eyewitness account, or is it an elaborate forgery created centuries later? The debate over this letter's authenticity has raged for years. Some scholars point to inconsistencies in the language and historical details as proof that it's a fake. Others argue that the vivid descriptions and unexpected details suggest it might be based on a real eyewitness account. As we delve deeper into the contents of this mysterious letter, we'll explore the evidence for and against its authenticity. But one thing's for sure, whether it's real or not, this letter has sparked a fascinating debate about what Jesus really looked like and why it matters. So, are you ready to have your mind blown even further? Because Jesus' hair color is just the beginning. Wait until you hear what Lentulus had to say about Jesus' eyes. The color of Jesus' hair was just the start of Lentulus' shocking description. But it's his next claim that's truly eye-opening. Could the Messiah really have possessed a feature so rare in the Middle East that it's almost unheard of? Lentulus' letter describes Jesus' eyes in a way that's not only unexpected, but potentially impossible for a man of his time and place. What could this mean for our understanding of Jesus' divine nature? Brace yourself, because Lentulus' description of Jesus' eyes is about to shatter every image you've ever had of the Son of God. According to this ancient letter, Jesus had intense blue eyes that pierced the soul of anyone who gazed upon them. Can you imagine it? The Savior of humanity, born in the heart of the Middle East, with eyes as blue as the Mediterranean Sea. Now, you might be thinking, wait a minute, that can't be right. And you'd have good reason to be skeptical. After all, blue eyes are incredibly rare in Middle Eastern populations. In fact, genetic studies have shown that the likelihood of someone from ancient Judea having blue eyes is astonishingly low. It's like finding a snowflake in the desert. So, how do we make sense of this seemingly impossible claim? Could Lentulus have been exaggerating, or maybe he was colorblind? Or is there something more profound at work here? Some scholars argue that this description of Jesus' blue eyes might be more symbolic than literal. In many cultures, blue eyes have been associated with divinity and purity. They're seen as a sign of the otherworldly, a connection to the divine. Could Lentulus have been using this imagery to emphasize Jesus' spiritual nature rather than his physical appearance? But here's where it gets really interesting. Did you know that Western art has been portraying Jesus with blue eyes for centuries? That's right. Since the Renaissance, artists have been painting Jesus with distinctly European features, including those piercing blue eyes. It's as if they took Lentulus's description and ran with it, creating an image of Jesus that would resonate with their European audience. Now, before you start thinking this is all just a Western conspiracy to whitewash Jesus, let's pump the brakes for a moment. Many scholars argue that Jesus, being a first-century Judean, would have had typical Semitic features. That means darker skin, dark hair, and yes, most likely brown eyes. It's a stark contrast to the blue-eyed, fair-skinned Jesus we often see in popular depictions. So, why does this matter? Well, it's not just about eye color. This debate over Jesus' appearance touches on much deeper issues of race, culture, and how we perceive divinity. It forces us to confront our own biases and assumptions about what holiness looks like. But Lentulus's letter doesn't stop at Jesus' eye color. Oh no, it goes into vivid detail about every aspect of his face. According to the letter, Jesus had a nose and mouth that were faultless. Can you picture it? A face so perfect it could have been carved by angels. And if you think that's surprising, wait until you hear what Lentulus had to say about Jesus' overall appearance. The letter describes him as having a countenance that was both terrible and mild. Imagine a face that could strike fear into the hearts of sinners while simultaneously comforting the downtrodden. It's an image that's hard to reconcile with our usual picture of the gentle, loving Jesus. But before we get too carried away with Lentulus's description of Jesus' face, we need to address the elephant in the room. Remember that golden brown hair we talked about earlier? Well, it turns out that's just as controversial as the blue eyes. In fact, the debate surrounding Jesus' hair color is even more heated than you might expect. Are you ready to dive into the tangled web of theories, historical evidence, and artistic interpretations surrounding Jesus' hair? Because let me tell you, this rabbit hole goes deeper than you could ever imagine. Just when you thought you'd heard it all about Jesus' appearance, an ancient letter drops a bombshell that will make your jaw hit the floor. Blonde hair on the Messiah. It sounds impossible, but this claim has sent shockwaves through religious and historical communities alike. What could this mean for our understanding of Jesus, and why has this detail been overlooked for so long? Let's dive deeper into this controversial claim. According to the letter attributed to Publius Lentulus, Jesus had hair the color of ripe wheat. Can you picture it? The Son of God with golden locks flowing down to his shoulders, shimmering in the Judean sun. It's an image that's hard to reconcile with what we've been taught about Jesus' appearance. Now, you might be thinking, wait a minute, that can't be right, and you'd have good reason to be skeptical. Historically, blonde hair isn't exactly common in ancient Judean populations. Most studies suggest that people in that region during Jesus' time typically had dark brown or black hair. So, how do we make sense of this seemingly impossible claim? Some scholars argue that this description might be more symbolic than literal. In various ancient cultures, blonde hair was associated with divinity or purity. It was seen as a sign of favor from the gods. Could Lentulus have been using this imagery to emphasize Jesus' divine nature rather than his actual physical appearance? But here's where it gets really interesting. Did you know that Western art has been portraying Jesus with blonde hair for centuries? That's right. Since the Renaissance, artists have been painting Jesus with distinctly European features, including those golden locks. It's as if they took Lentulus' description and ran with it, creating an image of Jesus that would resonate with their European audience. This concept of a Nordic Jesus has its roots in Western art, particularly during the Renaissance. Artists often depicted Jesus with European features, including blonde hair and blue eyes. But this portrayal has come under fire in recent years, with critics arguing that it promotes a Eurocentric view of Jesus that doesn't align with historical and geographical realities. So, why would someone include such a controversial detail in a description of Jesus? Some theories suggest it might have been an attempt to make Jesus more relatable to European audiences. Others argue it could be a misinterpretation of light reflecting off dark hair, making it appear lighter. Whatever the reason, this claim has had a profound impact on religious iconography throughout history. The Church's reaction to this information has been mixed, to say the least. Some religious leaders have embraced the idea of a blonde Jesus, while others have dismissed it as a historical inaccuracy. The debate has raged for centuries with no clear consensus in sight. But here's the real kicker. This description of Jesus with blonde hair challenges racial stereotypes in religion in a big way. It forces us to confront our preconceived notions about what holiness looks like. The idea of a blonde Jesus perpetuates the association of divinity with European features, which can alienate non-European believers and misrepresent the historical context of Jesus' life. Scientific studies on hair color genetics in Middle Eastern populations further complicate this narrative. They indicate that the majority of individuals in that region during the 1st century would have had darker hair. This makes the claim of a blonde Jesus even more controversial and unlikely from a historical perspective. As we peel back the layers of this mystery, we're left with more questions than answers. Was Jesus really blonde, or is this just another example of historical misrepresentation? And if it's the latter, what does that say about how we've interpreted religious history over the centuries? But hold on to your seats, because the letter's description of Jesus doesn't stop at his hair color. Just wait until you hear what Lentulus had to say about Jesus' build and height. Trust me, it's going to challenge everything you thought you knew about the physical appearance of the Messiah. Forget the meek and mild Jesus you've heard about. According to an ancient eyewitness account, Jesus was a giant among men. But how tall was he really, and what does this mean for our understanding of biblical events? The answer might shock you to your core. The letter attributed to Publius Lentulus doesn't just describe Jesus' hair and eye color. It goes on to paint a picture of a man with a truly remarkable stature. According to this ancient document, Jesus stood at an impressive height of about 6 feet tall. Now you might be thinking, that doesn't sound so tall. But hold on to your sandals, because in ancient Judea, that was practically giant territory. To put this in perspective, the average height of men in Jesus' time and region was significantly shorter. Most estimates put it around 5'5", or even less. So imagine a man who towered half a foot or more above everyone else in the crowd. That's the Jesus that Lentulus describes. He wouldn't just stand out in a crowd, he'd stand above it. But it's not just about height. The letter suggests that Jesus had perfect physical proportions. We're talking about a man who wasn't just tall, but well-built and strong. This isn't the scrawny, ascetic Jesus we often see in religious art. No, this description paints a picture of a man who was physically imposing, with a presence that commanded attention. Now let's think about what this means for our understanding of Jesus' life and ministry. How does the image of a tall, strong Jesus change the way we interpret biblical events? Imagine Jesus clearing the temple of money changers. It takes on a whole new dimension when you picture a physically imposing man overturning tables and driving out the merchants. Or consider the moments when Jesus stood up to the Pharisees and religious authorities. His words would have carried even more weight coming from a man who literally stood head and shoulders above his critics. It adds a new layer of understanding to why people were drawn to him and why the authorities might have felt threatened by his presence. But here's where it gets really interesting. This description of a physically strong Jesus actually aligns with what we know about his profession. Remember, before his ministry, Jesus was a carpenter. And let me tell you, carpentry in ancient times wasn't for the faint of heart. It involved heavy manual labor, lifting and shaping large pieces of wood without the benefit of modern tools. This work would have required significant strength and endurance, contributing to a robust physique. So while we often think of Jesus as a humble carpenter, we might need to rethink what that actually means. We're not talking about a skinny guy with a tool belt here. We're talking about a man whose profession demanded physical strength and stamina. It's an image that challenges our traditional narrative of a meek and mild Jesus. But the letter doesn't stop at describing Jesus' height and build. It goes on to specifically mention his physical strength. Can you imagine a Jesus who was not just spiritually powerful, but physically strong as well? It's a combination that would have made him a truly formidable figure in his time. This description of Jesus' physical presence forces us to reconsider how he might have been perceived by his contemporaries. A tall, strong man with piercing eyes and a commanding presence. It's no wonder people flocked to hear him speak and that his enemies felt threatened by him. As we grapple with this new image of Jesus, we're left with some intriguing questions. How does this physical description affect our understanding of his teachings? Does it change the way we interpret his actions and interactions? And perhaps most importantly, why has this aspect of Jesus' appearance been downplayed or ignored for so long? But hold on to your togas, because we're not done with the surprises yet. If you thought Jesus' height was shocking, wait until you hear what Lentulus had to say about his skin color. It's a description that's going to challenge everything you thought you knew about the appearance of the Messiah. The letter of Lentulus doesn't just stop at describing Jesus' impressive stature. It goes on to make a claim so controversial it's been swept under the rug for centuries. According to this ancient document, Jesus had skin as fair as the Romans themselves. But how could this be possible for a man born in the Middle East? And what does it mean for our understanding of race in biblical times? Brace yourself, because this description is about to turn everything you thought you knew about Jesus' appearance on its head. The letter claims that Jesus had a complexion that was fair and clear, more akin to a Roman nobleman than a man from Judea. It's a description that flies in the face of what we'd expect for someone born and raised in the Middle East 2,000 years ago. Now, you might be thinking, wait a minute, that can't be right. And you'd have good reason to be skeptical. Historical records and genetic studies suggest that the average person in ancient Judea likely had an olive-toned complexion, typical of Semitic populations in the region. The idea of Jesus having skin as fair as a Roman is about as likely as finding a polar bear in the Negev desert. So, what's going on here? Is this just another example of historical whitewashing? Or is there something more to this surprising description? The implications of this claim are far-reaching and touch on some sensitive issues of race and representation in religion. Throughout history, artistic depictions of Jesus have varied wildly, often reflecting the cultural biases of the artists and their patrons. Early Christian art, particularly before the 4th century, often showed Jesus as a youthful, beardless figure with no distinctive ethnic features. But as Christianity spread and became the official religion of the Roman Empire under Constantine, something interesting happened. Suddenly, Jesus started looking a lot more, European. Paintings and sculptures began portraying him with lighter skin, often with distinctly Western features. This trend continued through the Renaissance and beyond, giving us the fair-skinned, blue-eyed Jesus that's become so familiar in Western art. But here's where it gets really interesting. This whitewashing of Jesus isn't just an artistic choice. It's had profound implications for how people perceive race and divinity. By portraying Jesus as white, Western art has inadvertently promoted the idea that whiteness is somehow associated with holiness or divinity. It's a subtle message, but one that's had a lasting impact on religious iconography and racial attitudes. So, why would Lentulus describe Jesus this way? Some scholars argue that it might have been an attempt to make Jesus more relatable to a Roman audience. After all, if you're trying to convince the emperor that this new religious figure is worth paying attention to, describing him as looking like one of their own might be a savvy move. Others suggest that the description might be more symbolic than literal. In many ancient cultures, fairness of skin was associated with purity and divinity. Could Lentulus have been using this imagery to emphasize Jesus' spiritual nature rather than his physical appearance? But there's another possibility we need to consider. What if this description is simply a reflection of the biases and assumptions of its time? The Romans, like many conquering peoples throughout history, often viewed themselves as superior to the populations they ruled. Could this description of a fair-skinned Jesus be an unconscious projection of those attitudes? Regardless of the reason behind it, this description of Jesus' skin color forces us to confront some uncomfortable questions about how we perceive race and divinity. It challenges us to look beyond physical appearance and consider what really matters in our spiritual beliefs. As we grapple with these questions, we're left to wonder how much of what we think we know about Jesus' appearance is based on historical fact, and how much is shaped by centuries of cultural interpretation and artistic license. And more importantly, does it really matter what Jesus looked like, or is it his message that truly counts? But hold on to your scrolls, because we're not done unraveling the mysteries of this ancient letter yet. If you thought Jesus' skin color was controversial, wait until you hear how this document challenges everything we thought we knew about the historical Jesus. It's a revelation that's going to shake the foundations of religious history as we know it. Have you ever wondered why Jesus looks so different in various paintings and sculptures? It's not just artistic license. There's a fascinating psychological phenomenon at play. The way artists have portrayed Jesus over the centuries reveals more about us than it does about him. But now, science is stepping in to settle the debate once and for all. Are you ready to see the true face of Jesus? Let's start with the letter of Lentulus, which describes Jesus' face in vivid detail. According to this ancient document, Jesus had a countenance that was both terrible and mild, with a nose and mouth that were faultless. It paints a picture of a face so perfect it could have been carved by angels. But here's where things get interesting. This description is worlds apart from how Jesus has been portrayed in art throughout history. In the earliest Christian art, Jesus was often depicted as a youthful, beardless figure. These early images, found in the catacombs of Rome and ancient mosaics, showed a friendly and approachable Jesus, more like a good shepherd than a divine king. But as Christianity spread and gained power, something fascinating happened to Jesus' image. After Emperor Constantine legitimized Christianity in the 4th century, Jesus' appearance in art underwent a dramatic transformation. Suddenly, the beardless youth was replaced by a mature, bearded figure. This shift coincided with the display of important relics like the mandilion, which many scholars believe is what we now know as the Shroud of Turin. It's as if the very face of Christianity was growing up along with the religion itself. But the evolution of Jesus' image didn't stop there. As Christianity spread across different cultures and time periods, artists reimagined Jesus to reflect their own ideals of beauty and divinity. From the ethereal, otherworldly Christ of Byzantine icons to the muscular, heroic Jesus of the Renaissance, each era put its own spin on the Savior's appearance. Now, you might be wondering, why does this matter? Well, it turns out that these artistic depictions have a profound psychological impact on believers. In the 1990s, art historian David Morgan conducted a fascinating study on the impact of Warner Solomon's painting Head of Christ on religion in America. The results were eye-opening. Many respondents felt that Solomon's image looked exactly like they imagined Jesus. It's as if our mental image of Jesus is shaped more by the art we're exposed to than by historical reality. But in recent years, science has entered the chat, and it's changing everything we thought we knew about Jesus' appearance. Forensic anthropologists like Richard Neve have used first-century skulls from the Israel region and computer modeling techniques to create a more historically accurate representation of Jesus. The result? A Jesus who stands about 1.65 meters tall, with darker skin, dark eyes, and short curly hair. It's a far cry from the fair-skinned, blue-eyed Jesus we often see in Western art, and it doesn't stop there. The latest technology is pushing the boundaries even further. Dutch photographer and digital artist Bas Uderwijk has used advanced AI software to create a hyper-realistic image of Jesus. Trained on thousands of human faces, this AI-generated Jesus reflects Middle Eastern features and historically accurate hairstyles. It's like peering through a time machine to see the real face of Christ. But as we uncover these new images of Jesus, we're left with some profound questions. Does it matter what Jesus looked like, or is it more important to focus on his teachings and message? The absence of images or statues of Jesus from his lifetime suggests that early Christians, following Old Testament laws, avoided creating carved images to prevent idolatry. Perhaps they understood that God values what's in our hearts more than outward appearances. As we grapple with these new scientific recreations of Jesus' face, we're forced to confront our own biases and cultural assumptions. The evolution of Jesus' portrayal in art reflects not just changing artistic styles, but shifting cultural values and beliefs. From Rembrandt's 17th century depictions to modern AI recreations, each image of Jesus tells us something about the society that created it. But this journey through the face of Christ is just the beginning. As we peel back the layers of history and art, we're left with even more questions about the nature of faith, the power of imagery, and the true meaning of Jesus' message. Are you ready to dive deeper into the controversy surrounding the historical Jesus? Because what comes next might just shake the foundations of everything you thought you knew about Christianity. Just when you thought you knew everything about the church's stance on Jesus' appearance, a bombshell letter emerges that could change it all. The Lentulus letter, claiming to provide an eyewitness account of Christ's face, has been shrouded in mystery for centuries. But why has the Catholic Church kept this explosive document under wraps for so long? The answer might shock you to your core and make you question everything you've been told about the face of Christ. The controversy surrounding the Lentulus letter has raged for centuries, with the Catholic Church maintaining a skeptical stance. But why? Some argue that the Church fears the letter could undermine centuries of established iconography. After all, if Jesus looked drastically different from how he's been portrayed in Western art, it could shake the foundations of religious imagery worldwide. Others suggest a more sinister motive. Could the church be suppressing the letter to maintain control over Jesus' image? Historically, the church has indeed suppressed images that don't conform to its theological or cultural narratives. This has led to a narrow view of Jesus' appearance in Western art, often depicting him with distinctly European features. But what if the letter were true? The implications for faith could be staggering. Imagine the uproar if it were proven that Jesus looked nothing like the fair-skinned, blue-eyed figure we've seen in countless paintings. It could force us to confront our own biases and assumptions about what holiness looks like. The Church's official stance on physical depictions of Jesus is more complex than you might think. While artistic representations of Christ are abundant in Catholic tradition, the Church has always emphasized that these are interpretations, not historical records. In fact, many theologians argue that focusing on Jesus' appearance detracts from his teachings and the essence of his message. This perspective is supported by early Church fathers, who noted that Jesus' appearance was not remarkable. It's as if they're telling us it's not about what he looked like, but what he taught and did. This aligns with the absence of physical descriptions of Jesus in the New Testament, suggesting that early Christians may have intentionally avoided depicting him to prevent idolatry. But here's where it gets really interesting. What if the Lentulus letter isn't the only hidden document? Could there be other ancient texts or artifacts that the Church has kept under wraps? The possibility of more revelations about Jesus' life and appearance is enough to send shivers down your spine. So, what do the experts say about the Lentulus letter's authenticity? The consensus among scholars is that it's likely a medieval forgery. The letter's late emergence in Christian literature and lack of corroborating evidence cast doubt on its authenticity. However, some argue that even if it's not a genuine first-century document, it might be based on earlier traditions or descriptions that have been lost to time. The debate over Jesus' appearance reflects broader theological debates about the nature of Christ and the importance of his teachings over his physical form. It highlights the tension between cultural representation and theological integrity. Different Christian denominations approach this issue variably, with some emphasizing the need for culturally relevant depictions that resonate with local populations, while others adhere strictly to traditional Western representations. As we grapple with these revelations, we're left to wonder how this affects modern Christianity. Does it matter what Jesus looked like, or only what he taught? The ongoing debate about Jesus' appearance forces us to confront our own biases and assumptions about race, divinity, and the nature of faith itself. In the end, perhaps the true power of the Lentulus letter lies not in its historical accuracy, but in the questions it forces us to ask. As we peel back the layers of history and tradition, we're challenged to look beyond the surface and focus on the heart of Jesus' message. And isn't that, after all, what faith is really about? Faith may transcend appearance, but what if we told you that a single letter could turn everything you thought you knew about Jesus on its head? The Lentulus letter isn't just another historical curiosity. It's a potential powder keg that could explode long-held beliefs about Christ's image and spark a religious revolution. Let's recap the bombshells dropped by this controversial document. According to the letter, Jesus had piercing blue eyes, hair the color of ripe wheat, and skin as fair as a Roman. He stood tall and strong, with a presence that commanded attention. It's a description that flies in the face of everything we've been taught about Jesus' appearance. But is this letter the key to unlocking the true face of Christ, or is it just an elaborate hoax? The debate rages on with compelling arguments on both sides. Those who believe in its authenticity point to the vivid details and unexpected claims as evidence of a genuine eyewitness account. After all, why would someone invent such specific and controversial details? On the other hand, skeptics argue that there's no historical record of a governor named Publius Lentulus in Judea at that time. They also point out inconsistencies in the language and historical details that suggest it might be a later forgery. The lack of corroborating evidence from other sources of the period casts further doubt on its authenticity. But here's where it gets really interesting. If the Lentulus letter is genuine, it could rewrite religious history as we know it. Imagine the implications for biblical scholarship if we had a confirmed eyewitness account of Jesus' appearance. It would force us to reevaluate centuries of artistic depictions and challenge our understanding of racial representation in religious iconography. This controversy doesn't just affect Christianity, it has profound implications for interfaith dialogue and discussions about race in religion. The idea of a blue-eyed, fair-skinned Jesus challenges the common perception of Christ as a man of Middle Eastern descent. It forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about how we've portrayed divinity and holiness throughout history. But hold on to your scrolls, because this might just be the tip of the iceberg. If the Lentulus letter is authentic, what other hidden documents might be out there waiting to be discovered? Could there be more eyewitness accounts of Jesus that have been lost to time? The possibilities are enough to make your head spin. So, what's the most compelling evidence we have? While the jury's still out on the letter's authenticity, the strongest argument against it is the lack of historical corroboration. No other documents from the period mention a governor named Lentulus or provide similar descriptions of Jesus. This silence speaks volumes in the world of historical research. Yet, even if the letter isn't genuinely from the 1st century, it still holds value as a piece of Christian tradition. It reflects how people have imagined and reimagined Jesus throughout history, adapting his image to different cultures and contexts. As we grapple with these revelations, we're left to ponder what they mean for our personal faith. Does it really matter what Jesus looked like, or is it his message that truly counts? Perhaps the greatest value of the Lentulus letter lies not in its historical accuracy, but in the questions it forces us to ask about our own beliefs and assumptions. In the end, whether the letter is fact or fiction, it challenges us to look beyond the surface and focus on the heart of Jesus' teachings. It reminds us that faith is about more than just appearances. It's about how we live our lives and treat others. And isn't that, after all, the true essence of Christianity? As we've journeyed through the mysteries of Jesus' appearance, one thing becomes clear. His true face may forever remain hidden in the mists of time. But perhaps that's the point. St. Augustine argued that recognizing Jesus as human is what truly matters for salvation, not how we visualize him. So, does it really matter what Jesus looked like? Or is it his teachings of love and compassion that should captivate our hearts? The Lentulus letter, whether fact or fiction, challenges us to look beyond the surface and focus on the essence of faith. As we close this chapter, let's reflect on our own beliefs. How do we perceive holiness? Are we too caught up in appearances, or can we see the divine in every face we encounter?